being in such a straight-based society. Have you ever thought of yourself differently, like since you came out?
That's a complicated question because, I was married before to a woman. So
Mm-hmm.
I was in not a Christian marriage, but in a heterosexual marriage. And when I entered into the marriage with Sally, my then wife, she was aware that I did not have a traditional sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
When we married, she knew that I had already um, experimented sexually with men and women. So the coming out process was, slowly in stages for me. And do I think of myself differently now that I'm out? In some ways, yes. I think it took me a long time to understand it, and part of that was because there were no social supports to help understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of had to um, find your way through it blind in the 70s
Mm-hmm.
and the 80s. But I think that coming out has created a better understanding of myself.
And then you said no social support. So did your brothers or your parents ever give you any sort of leeway to one or the other?
No, sort of the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in grade school and living at home, and even a little bit in high school, my parents were very sensitive to any behavior of mine that was not gender appropriate. So my
Mm-hmm.
mom would be upset if I played with girls. My mom would be upset if I played with dolls. Um, my parents were upset by things like me preferring to dance over wanting to play baseball.
Okay.
So my family, the opposite, they were not supportive, they were repressive.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother Mark was sort of like my family. They also sort of shamed me. I got called names,
Mm-hmm.
sissy, all kinds of names by my family. So the environment was the opposite of supportive. It was restrictive and
Okay.
repressive.
You talk about, or you did talk about how when you were younger, your family and not everyone understood or even accepted what you were going through. Is that still the same now, or have they become more lenient and understood what you're going through? Especially since you've been with Eric for a while now.
I've been with Eric for 15 years. The climate in my family has changed, but it's taken a long time, and also it's taken some fight on my part. I mean, it's not only, as I said before, my family. I went to a Catholic grade school. I grew up in a very macho Italian American neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
which was not really supportive of me and who I was. Everyone sort of, it wasn't a great time for me.
Mm-hmm.
People respected me because I was usually the smartest person in the school, but also I was shamed because it was clear that I was not a standard boy's boy.
Mm-hmm.
My family has changed now, but part of that is when I turned 16 and I graduated from high school, I moved away to go to college so I could find out who I was, and just to be honest, to get away from my family. Because my family did not allow me the room to experiment to find out who I was. I think my parents were both afraid that I would be non-normative,
Mm-hmm.
and I could feel their fear and their shame. So I went a good distance from my family for a long time. And when I came back, I had a pink mohawk, or I was dressing in a skirt, all kinds of things that shocked them, and I had to fight for my rights and stand up and say, if you can't accept me for who I am, then you won't see me. So it is different now. Part of it is the passage of time. Part of it is the general feeling in the country, the general social atmosphere. Part of it is that I fought a battle for 30 years.
Do you think that in general, marriages as a whole are losing that connection with each other and they're becoming just something that you do over time? Do you think that we're losing the fact of loving each other to being more of just, oh, I'm getting older, I should settle down now?
It's interesting because I read an article very recently that was written by an Indian man, Indian from India, who was writing about the difference between what they have in India is arranged marriage and the American-style marriage. And he says the Americans go into marriage, and once things start to not go the way they thought they were, then they're getting divorced. Whereas in India, you usually get married, you've never met the person you're going to marry before, but you settle into a long-term relationship where you grow into love. So it's sort of a social contract, which is sort of what I was saying about mine and Eric's relationship. It's a social contract that you realize over the long term, as opposed to an ideal about romance. I think that there are I think the society, modern Western society, over-prioritizes the romantic aspects of relationships, which is why so many young marriages result in divorce.
And what is your stance on divorce?
I'm divorced. So I was in a heterosexual marriage and I got divorced.
But I mean your stance on divorce as like people marry and then if they don't like, they get out of